Shavua Tov, Bruchim Habayim, and Shalom Aleichem. Welcome all. I would like to welcome you tonight for a beautiful speaker. He's my rabbi for over 25 years from Brooklyn, New York. We started, my wife and I, Adina, shul.com for one reason only. We wanted to inspire people to come and learn with inspirational speakers, with real Talmidei Chachamim. And over the last few years, we've brought down over 50 Talmidei Chachamim in order to inspire you here in Surfside and all over Miami. And we're going to be doing much, much more in the coming future. Before we begin, we're going to say one parak of Tehillim. Before we begin, we're going to say one parak of Tehillim for Klal Yisrael to be Matzliach. So I'm going to invite Shimon Tanami to come say one parak of Tehillim, and then we will begin with my rabbi, Rabbi Eliyahu Mansour.
Shir Lama Alot Esa Enai El-Harim MEIR Yavo Ezri MEIR Adonai Oseh Shamayim Va'aret Aliten Kadmot Raglecha Al Yanim Shomrecha Hine Lo Yanim V'lo Yishan Shomer Yisrael Adonai Shomrecha Adonai Silecha Al Yad Yeminecha Mama Shemesh Lo Yakeka V'yareach Ba'alayla Adonai Yishmercha Mikora Yishmor Et Nafshecha Adonai Yishmor Ketcha Uvoecha Me'ata V'ad Olam.
Shavua Tov Mevorach. I've been to many Tehillim readings, but none as pure as the one that we've just experienced. And I am certain that with such a Tinukot Shel Bet Rabban, the young, pure souls of our nation leading a Tehillim like that, I'm quite certain that just like on earth it has created an emotional stir for our members here tonight, I'm sure even the heavens are going to have a hard time denying that prayer from being answered. I want to thank Mr. Dagmi for hosting tonight. I want to thank the young Israel of Bal Harbor. I want to thank the new rabbi, wish him well in his new position. I'm sure he'll succeed. And it's quite impressive. Motzei Shabbat, after a full day of eating, learning, and praying, that Baruch Hashem, we have a full house here tonight without an empty seat. Mi kamecha ki Yisrael, who is like our nation and like our people. On the way in, somebody said, how can we miss it? Saturday Night Live. It's not too sure what he meant exactly, but nonetheless, because we have such a large crowd here tonight, I felt that I must reveal a great secret. And believe me, it's a secret. And I think it's pertinent and it could be used, relevant during the war that we're experiencing. But that'll be at the end. We're a few weeks before Hanukkah. So I'd like to direct my comments related to the upcoming holiday. There must be mental preparations. Besides the physical preparations of buying the equipment and the hardware and setting up the menorah, our holidays also need some intellectual stimulation to prepare us mentally for what we're about to do. So I'd like to begin the talk tonight with a Segula. Now, I know our nation has an affinity to Segulot. Basically, a Segula is, you do something and it brings a certain, hopefully a positive result. I must admit that I am very skeptical when it comes to Segulot, because a lot of them are unfounded. There's no source for them, and it's just some sort of scam or some sort of good idea that somebody has, and all of a sudden turns into a Segula. Read this 40 times forwards and 16 times backwards and jump a few times. And again, I don't like to...
the red string.
Yeah, the red string is my favorite. Somebody asked me, is it a Segula to wear a red string around your wrist? I said, absolutely. He says, Baruch Hashem, because he was wearing 2 of them. I said, it's a Segula for Parnassah. So, Baruch Hashem. I said, the one that sold it to you made a lot of money. For him, it was a very good Segula, that's for sure. I'm not sure about the guy who bought it, but anyway, so I think we should be cautious whenever it comes to, even though the nation of Bnei, we are called Am Segula. So we have a certain attraction to these get-rich, quick schemes, but again, they have to be verified. So I'm coming to tell you one tonight that is verified. And you might have heard of it, but now I'm going to teach you the source, and I'd like to teach you how it works, the mechanics of it. Maybe once you lost something or you misplaced something, and they told you, or you were going through a crisis of some sort, and you needed a Yeshua, and they told you put $1 in the tzedakah box and say 3 words, ELAHA, DeMEIR, ANENI. And you might have enjoyed a positive outcome and a positive result. I was in Miami here for Pesach actually, and we were in the Altir down the block, and I took the kids on a boat. And so when the guy was getting on the boat, the captain, his keys fell into the water. Now we can't start the boat. The keys fell into the water. How are you going to find the keys in the water now? We don't have a scuba suit or anything. So I told him 3 words, ELAHA. Now this is not a Jewish guy, he's a Mexican guy. ELAHA, DeMEIR, ANENI. What is that? Just say it 3 times. And miraculously enough, don't ask how he found it. He just jumped right in. The first thing he picked it up, and so it works. It works. It seems you don't have to be Jewish for this thing to work. And I'll show you. I have a proof that you don't have to be Jewish for it to work. Actually, the original first time, the inaugural usage of ELAHA DeMEIR was used not by a Jew, it was actually used by a Goy. So I'd like to bring you the source. It's Gemara Avodah Zarah, page Yudhet. So the Gemara says that Beruria, the famous Beruria, who was Beruria? She was the wife of Rabbi MEIR. Yes, she was the wife of Rabbi MEIR. Barthe Rav Hananya ben Teradion Havai. And she came from great stock. She was the daughter of a great rabbi called Rav Hananya ben Teradion. And what happened is that they had taken her sister into captivity. And after they took her into captivity, so Beruria went to the MEIR and says, what are you doing for my sister? You're a tzaddik and you got to help. So the MEIR says, okay, let me see what I could do. So the Gemara goes on to say that he goes to the prison, Azal legabe shomer, and he meets the warden. And he tells to the warden, there's a girl over here, do me a favor, here's some money, release her. He says, I can't release her. The government has a strict, list of who all the inmates, and if they see this girl missing, I'm going to be in danger. So the MEIR comes along and says, after he says mistafina means I'm afraid min malchut. Amar le, he says, no problem, I have a Segula for you. You see those dogs? The dogs that they had protecting the prison were ravenous dogs. They were like cannibals. They're man-eating dogs. So the MEIR says, we're going to release the dogs, and they're going to come at you. And you're going to turn to them and say, ELAHA DeMEIR ANENI, ELAHA DeMEIR ANENI, ELAHA DeMEIR ANENI, and they're going to stop in their tracks. And he tries it, the warden, and sure enough, they're coming at him, and he says, ELAHA DeMEIR ANENI. Now, in this case, he didn't find the keys to the boat, but better, the dogs stopped in their tracks. So he says, that's incredible. He says, you never have to be afraid. If the government is going to come after you, and they're going to, punish you for freeing this girl, you just say those 3 words. So he frees the MEIR's sister-in-law. Sure enough, the government comes after him, and they take attendance, and they find out that he actually let an inmate go, and they bring him to the gallows. And he's at the gallows, and he has the guillotine on his neck. And all of a sudden he says, ELAHA DeMEIR ANENI, and all of a sudden everybody runs away, and the guillotine opens up, and he's able to free himself. So that's the source of where it comes from. So this is a Gemara. So this is not some fairy tale or some Segula de jour. This is actually coming from a documented source. Gemara Avodah Zarah, Daf Yud Het. Now follow what I'm going to tell you in the back of the book. There's a rabbi called Maharsha. See, the Maharsha, there's small words, and then there's even smaller words. What I'm reading you tonight is from the smaller words. Most people skip this, but there's a great secret here. If you would have asked me last week, what does ELAHA DeMEIR ANENI mean? Who is MEIR? MEIR. Right, MEIR Balanes. That's what I would have said. If you'd asked me to translate ELAHA DeMEIR ANENI, I would have said, the God of Rabbi Meir, answer me. And I'm embarrassed to say how wrong I was. Because the Maharsha writes that we have a rule. ויש לדקדק. איך ייחד רבי מאיר שמו של הקדוש ברוך הוא על עצמו בחייו? How did Rabbi Meir put God's name next to his name, ELAHA DeMEIR, when he was alive? Because we have a rule. שהרי אמרו, אין הקדוש ברוך הוא מייחד שמו על הצדיקים בחייהם. God will not put his name on the tzaddik as long as they're still alive. As the pasuk says, Elohei Abraham ufahad Yitzchak. Abraham was dead. He had passed. So it says Elohei Abraham. Yitzchak was still alive. So God says ufahad Yitzchak. And what's the explanation? As long as the tzaddik is still alive, Borei Olam says, well, he didn't get to the finish line yet, so I can't put my name next to his name until he passes and he reaches, the end as a tzaddik. So therefore it's Elohei Avraham, because that was after he passed. Ufahad Yitzchak, because he was still alive. So says the Maharsha, Rabbi Meir was alive. So how could Rabbi Meir, with all due respect, say ELAHA DeMEIR? He's taking God's name and putting it next to his name. That's the Maharsha. He has a technical halachic problem with ELAHA DeMEIR. Now, in his first answer, he says, so you know what? I'm convinced that when it says Meir, it's not Rabbi Meir. What is Meir then? So in his first answer, he says, V'yesh lomar, de lo amar ELAHA DeMEIR, rak l'siman be'alma. It's just a remez, it's just a hint al shemo, ve'lo nitkaven kol ikar al shemo. He didn't mean it all regarding his name, although it's a nice coincidence. Rak nitkaven ELAHA DeMEIR la'aretz ve'ladarim aleha. Hu ya'anenu. God is called DeMEIR. HaMe'ir la'aretz ve'ladarim aleha. We say it every day in Shacharit. God is DeMEIR. God is the one that illuminates. God provides us sunlight, the shemesh. So it's not wrong to call God DeMEIR. So therefore when we say ELAHA DeMEIR, we don't mean ELAHA de Rabbi Meir. We mean ELAHA DeMEIR, the God that creates the sun, that gives us illumination to the whole entire world and to those that are dwelling. ANENI, answer me. Now he probably picked Meir because that was his name, so it's a nice euphemism, but it's not referring to him. Now that's a hadush. I'm going to say 99% of Segula followers are not aware that ELAHA DeMEIR is not Meir. If you look in some of the Silichot books, we sing ELAHA DeMEIR in Silichot. You see in some of the books they have in parentheses, ELAHA de Rabbi Meir. Well, I think we should keep it in parentheses because according to this Maharsha, it's Meir La'aretz. Fine, but that's not what I came to talk about tonight. It's the second answer of the Maharsha that to me, it is nothing short than stunning. I see that these seats do not have seat belts, so I'll ask you to hold on to the railing. I don't know if they paid the insurance yet this month, the shul. And we don't want a liability. This is incredible what I'm going to read you now. O she'amar ELAHA DeMEIR lanu, the God that brought us light, b'malchut Yavan, during the kingdom of the Greeks, b'nes hanerot shel Hanukkah, by providing us and making us the miracle of lights, holiday of lights, Hanukkah. I mean, that's incredible, which means what ELAHA DeMEIR actually is saying, the God that made for us the miracle of Hanukkah, which is Hag HaMeir, so he should provide us miracles as he did then for us as well. That means ELAHA DeMEIR basically is connecting us to the holiday of Hanukkah. That's amazing. And you know the miracle of Hanukkah, they found the Pak Shemen, and there wasn't enough only for one night, and then it lasted for 8 nights. When I studied in Lakewood Yeshiva, so they used to give the weekend off for Hanukkah. So you get Friday, Shabbat, and Sunday, which is a big thing for the yeshiva to give any days off. But what would happen is the boys would end up taking the whole week. So the Rosh Yeshiva would say it's the 1-day vacation that turned into 8 days. It's the miracle of the Lakewood vacation in the yeshiva. And it happened every year, so it's even better than the miracle of Hanukkah. But to me, that's an amazing concept. ELAHA DeMEIR, when you lost your object, or when you're going through a crisis, or you have, God forbid, some sort of distress or some sort of issue, and you need a Yeshua, so where are we drawing our salvation from? The salvation is coming from Hanukkah. That means even though we're in the middle of the year, we're 6 months away from Hanukkah, but it seems there's an energy that Hanukkah has, and it seems that energy is available the entire year. I'm sure it's more available during the Hag, but it seems that one can access the miracle of the Meir, of the Nerot. And the way you access it is by saying 3 magical words, ELAHA DeMEIR ANENI, and I'm reading the Lashon of the Maharsha again, ELAHA DeMEIR lanu b'malchut Yavan b'nes hanerot shel Hanukkah. Now that's a hadush. So now if somebody asks you in the street, when we say ELAHA DeMEIR, what is Meir? Oh, Nerot Hanukkah. What? Nerot Hanukkah? Where'd you get that from? That's the Maharsha on the Gemara, Avodah Zarah, Daf Yud Het. That's how he learns. And if you want miracles, and you want Yeshuot, and you want salvations, it all lies in Nerot Hanukkah. There's something in Nerot Hanukkah. I must point out, I don't think it's a coincidence, but there's a great rabbi called Ben Ish Hai, Rabbeinu Yosef Hayim from Baghdad, And he writes, interestingly enough, in Hilchot Hanukkah, in Parashat Miketz, first year, and he says, by the way, some of the tzaddikim have a custom that when they light the Nerot Hanukkah, on one of the nights of Hanukkah at least, they put a separate candle away from the menorah and they light it in honor of Rabbi MEIR. And they say, ELAHA DeMEIR ANENI. That's amazing. That means the Ben Ish Chai also understood that the menorah is the MEIR. That's the MEIR that we're talking about. And if you want to have Nisim, V'niflaot, and Yeshuot, we must figure out how to connect to the MEIR, to Nerot Hanukkah. And that's what I came to analyze tonight. What is the secret? We have a holiday called Pesach also. We have a holiday called Sukkot. We have so many holidays. Why is it Nes Hanukkah and specifically the Nerot, the MEIR, that brings for us energies that are supernatural? And I point out, Hanukkah is it's not the only supernatural holiday we have. I would say that on Pesach there were more miracles than Hanukkah. The sea split. According to the Talmud, there were no less than 50 miracles just as the splitting of the sea. I mean, we have Hanukkah, we have Sukkot, ANENI, the clouds of glory. That was a miracle, not 8 days. That was a miracle every single day for 40 years. But that's not the source of Yeshuot. We don't say ELAHA de Kriyat Yamsuf, and we don't say ELAHA de ANENI. We say ELAHA de MEIR, Nerot Hanukkah. And that was the Meir's Hidush to us. And my question is, what's the mechanics? How does this thing work? So I'd like to bring to your attention another Gemara. So the Gemara I'm going to bring you tonight is in Shabbat. It's on Daf Ayin Zayin. Listen to a Gemara. Gemara says, Rabbi Zera Ashkach l'Rabbi Yehuda. He found Rabbi Yehuda. Dehava ka'eh apetchad de behamu. He was by the door or the porch of his father-in-law. V'chazya dehava bedicha da'ateh. He was in a good mood. So if he was in a good mood, albeit he was at the door of his father-in-law, so maybe that's the Hidush, that nonetheless he was in a good mood. But that's my own interpretation. Dehava bedicha da'ateh. He was happy. And he said, you can ask me any question on any topic. You see, you can get the rabbi in a good mood. Sometimes the rabbis, they're tired or they're nervous and you catch them at the wrong time and you ask them a question and they brush you off. In this case over here, the rabbi was in a good state of mind. He was happy, badi haleh, and he told the students, he said, listen, today's your lucky day. You can ask me any question you have on any topic. And you have to be a great rabbi to take that risk. I remember we had a neighbor in Brooklyn, Rabbi Avigdor Miller, alav shalom, and he used to give the famous Thursday night class. And the best part of the class was the last 15 minutes where he would say, and now you can ask me a question on any topic. And he didn't get the questions before, like in the debate. This was all off the cuff. And they would ask him the deepest questions, and he would give such an eloquent, I would say well prepared, but they weren't prepared. It was extemporaneous. If you would prepare for 2 weeks, you couldn't answer the way he answered just like that. But okay, Rabbi Miller's able to do that. And I guess Rabbi Yehuda also, it's a great rabbi, he said, today's your lucky day, ask any question. So here's the question they threw at him. So he says, Amar leh. So Rabbi Zera tells Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi, my ta'ama izeh mesgan beresha vehadar imreh. Why is it that the goats go before the sheep? And I'm saying to myself, you could have asked any question. I mean, the genie came out of the bottle. You have any question, that's the question? I mean, and if I was the rabbi, that would put me in a bad mood very quickly, by the way. What kind of question? That's a ridiculous question. Why do the goats go before the sheep? I don't think even Rabbi Miller can answer this question. What kind of question is this over here? When is Mashiach coming? Ask a question of substance. What's the secret of life? How to raise good children? These are all questions that you get one shot from the rabbi. These are the questions you're waiting for your whole life to ask. And he gets the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and he's more concerned about the file and the formation and the marching of goats that come before sheep. And Rashi elucidates the question, and he says because the sheep are white and the goats are black. So why do the black goats go before the white sheep? Now, I'm going to venture to say that if I don't give you the answer to this question, none of you will lose a minute of sleep tonight. I don't think anybody on the way out is like, come on, Rabbi, I'm so curious. I have to know that thing. It never bothered you, and even now that you know this fact, you still don't care too much about it. Who cares? I'm not a farmer. I don't know about black goats and white sheep. And I couldn't care less if the sheep went first or they don't go first. It doesn't affect me. But it seems that it's a good question because Rav Yehuda answered. He said, I have an answer for this. Now listen to what he answers. Oh, you want to know why? Amar leh kibriyato shel olam. Now that's big. He says you've asked a question that actually gets to the core of one of the fundamentals of B'riyato shel Olam. It's one of the principles or the axioms that God has placed in the world. The world runs by certain rules. There's the rules of gravity, and there's the rules of science, and there's the rules of mathematics. So there's certain basic principles that God uses in the running of the world, and the black sheep going before, the black goats going before the white sheep is one of those, geometric theorems of life. What is it? He said, I'll tell you what it is. The Beresha Hashocha Vehadar Nehora. The rule at work here is it's got to be dark first and then the light. And there's the answer. And I didn't really understand the question too much, and the answer sounds even more enigmatic. That there's a rule. The dark has to precede the light. Vahi Erev, Vahi Boker. And you see it now. So the next time you're in, in a farm somewhere in the middle of America, and you see the black goat traveling before the white sheep, you have to say, this is B'riyato shel Olam. You're witnessing over here a core principle of the way Hashem placed and invested in the world. The Hoshech must precede the Or, the light. So I went on a search to try to find some rabbi that will elucidate this principle. I never learned this principle. That Hashocha Vehadar Nehora. To the credit of the Kahal, not my credit, I found an essay by a rabbi called Rav Tzadok HaKohen. Rav Tzadok HaKohen wrote many sefarim. The book that I'm quoting from tonight is called Resise Laila. He wrote this book in chapters. This is in the 24th chapter of Resise Laila. You could look it up yourself, it's good reading. I'll paraphrase what he says. He's quoting this Gemara, and he says there's a klal, there's a rule, it's axiomatic, the way Hashem created the world. before something great is going to happen, something positive, something phenomenal, something beneficial, there always has to be a difficult and a dark and a complicated road that precedes it. It's the way it is. And he says, I'll bring you an example. The greatest day in history is Matan Torah. The 6th day of Sivan, the year 2448 from creation. But that day was preceded by 210 years of the Jewish people suffering through one of the most bitter exiles of their existence. Avodat Parich, backbreaking labor for 86 years. Paro taking blood baths, 300 children a day. The Egyptians using our babies as human bricks. Don't believe when they tell you that it's unprecedented. The news likes to use that word because it catches your attention. Unprecedented means never happened. It's unprecedented in our lifetimes, maybe. But King Solomon was wise when he said, En kol hadash tahat hashamish. There is nothing new under the sun. We were not around in Egypt when Paro was killing 300 babies a day, taking blood baths. So that was the Hoshech, and it was a long, dark night. But then at the end, when the sun started to come up, so then we have all of a sudden Moses standing at Har Sinai giving us the Torah. And according to Rav Tzadok HaKohen, you couldn't have gotten to the white sheep. The Jewish people are compared to a sheep. You couldn't have got to that moment at Har Sinai unless you went through the dark tunnel of Galut Mitzrayim. He doesn't say why it has to be that way, but that's the way it is. His second proof, which is even a little more interesting, he says the Jewish people build the Mishkan, the tabernacle. So the Mikdash becomes the portable Bet Knesset that would travel with the Jewish people during the 40 years of the Midbar, and the Shekhinah would rest in the Mishkan. That's a very, very important structure. But what was the impetus to build the Mishkan? The sin of the golden calf. The Jewish people reached a very low level. And as a result, after it was all over, God said, instead of taking gold and using it to build some Avodah Zarah, take that same gold and build the Mishkan in my name. But it had to go through a very, very low, dark place. The black goats had to go before the white sheep. And if you look in history, you'll see it 1,000 times. I mean, just look at our history. The darkest times in the last century was clearly the destruction of European Jewry, the Shoah, the Holocaust. Very, very dark time. 6 million Jews, a third of the population. When Menachem Begin met Jimmy Carter, he told Carter, he says, the Germans tertiated my people. Carter says, I never heard that word tertiate. He said, you know what decimate means? To decimate is to kill 1 in 10. Dek is 10. To tertiate, which was the word that Begin just made up, is to kill 1 out of 3. He says they didn't decimate by people, they tertiated by people. I'm sorry to say, I don't think it changed Carter's opinion about the Jewish people. Nonetheless, after the Holocaust was over, it was a very dark time. The Jewish people were in a very, very low place. And all of a sudden, we get the biggest gift of the modern time. Eretz Yisrael. All of a sudden, we have a homeland. All of a sudden, we have, a few years after that, access to the Kotel HaMaravi. And before you know it, all the yeshivas that were destroyed in Europe find themselves being regenerated and rebuilt in Eretz Yisrael. There was a revitalization of the people with Eretz Yisrael, a land that we didn't have access to for 2,000 years. It's almost as if you say, that's what Tzaddik was talking about. You had to go through that low, terrible place. It's almost like we say in the Haggadah Shel Pesach, Va'omar lach bedamayich hayi bedamayich hayi. For some reason that before hayi, there has to be damayich. There has to be blood. There has to be some sacrifice of someone, somewhere, in order to bring this great result. It's a principle. Vayerev vayiboker. I know it myself, and I'm sure everybody has stories in their careers with that ups and downs. I never met anybody that has a straight road. Maybe the Wizard of Oz, they talk about the yellow brick road, but that's the movies. The people that I met, they always have a depression in the road. So always the road all of a sudden dips, and they have downs. I know it myself in my own career. I was in a very high place, and all of a sudden, everything turned around, and I found myself going backwards in life. Instead of moving forward in growing and influence, etc., all of a sudden, it's almost as if I made a U-turn. Nothing of my control, just the way things worked. And it put me in a very, very, I wouldn't say depression, but I was down. And I saw a great rabbi in Israel, Rabbi Reuven Elbaz. And I told him my concerns. And he said, Rabbi Eliyahu, let me tell you what the Gemara says. The Gemara says that every blade of grass has an angel. And the angel is the administrator of that blade. I thought that was a Hadush in itself. It's not that there's one angel in charge of all the pasture. It's one angel per blade. And then the Gemara says, and the angel has a stick. And he hits the grass, and he says to the blade, grow. Al kol eseb ve'eseb yesh malach shemakeh oto ve'omer lo gidal. He hits the blade and then says, grow. So Rabbi Elbaz asked me, why does he have to hit it? Why can't he just say, grow? And he answered, because before every growth spurt, there has to be a makah. The growth spurt has to be preceded with a makah. It just doesn't come like that. There has to be a little hoshech, and from the hoshech will come on. And therefore he said, what's happening to you is now you're going through the makah. But I guarantee you that the makah will lead to gedal. That's the way it works. And then he pointed to himself. He says, take it from me. You see me over here today at an apex, at a very high point. He says, this high point did not come always ascending. It came with makot, it came with getting hit, and then after the makah, there was always another opportunity for growth, and there was always an elevation. It's a new way of looking at life. Most people, when they get hit with something, they become depressed, they become debilitated, they become paralyzed, they don't want to get out of bed. But if you know the B'riyatoh Shel Olam, if you know the rules, the way God runs the world, God is setting us up for something great. Be prepared, something amazing is about to happen. If you could just get through the makah, that's a rule. And it has to work. Just like the geometric rules work. Every right angle is 90 degrees. And Pythagorean theorem will always be a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and transitive property has to work. These are rules. They don't change. And when it comes to these rules of B'riyatoh Shel Olam, it's gravity. It's got to work. It's like that with everything in life. If you studied botany or biology, the Gemara says, where does human beings come from? What's their origin? The Gemara says, we originate from tipa seruha, a putrid seed. Now I understand a seed, but putrid? And the Gemara goes on to explain, because in planting, the seed always decays first. it reaches almost a point of deterioration. It becomes putrid, and then all of a sudden, from the darkness where you thought there's no life, something grows. It's not a tipa. It's got to be siruha before it's able to bring life. It's the way it is. I mean, look at our people. In Egypt, we reached the 49th level of impurity. That's a low place. That's darkness. Incidentally, it wasn't 49. It was 49.99999. We were 1 nanosecond before the point of no return. And then what happened? From the greatest darkness, Yetziat Mitzrayim, and we went from 49.999 negative to plus 49.99. It's just the way it works. To me, it's very comforting. But I said to myself, is there a way to bypass this system? Because to be honest with you, I don't like this system. I understand I have to accept the system, and I understand I cannot change gravity. And I can't change a right angle. But I want to know, instead of taking the tunnel, maybe I could take the bridge. Maybe there's another way that I could bypass having to go through Hoshech to get to Or. Congratulations to all that are here tonight. I found it. It's my lucky night, and it's your lucky night just as well. I found it. But you just need a little introduction. It's going to sound mystical, because it is. And I'm telling you now, it's based on some Kabbalistic source, but also has its roots in the Talmud. Did you ever hear, let's start with this. God creates the world, first day, Yehi Or, let there be light. How did you learn it? You say, oh, the sun. No, it can't be the sun. The sun wasn't created until Wednesday. So what is Yehi Or? Unless you tell me, no, God created the sun, but he just put it on earth. He didn't hang it up yet. That might be one interpretation. By the way, side point, maybe we'll meet again to talk about this. When they tell you, the scientists, and they're proving this today, that in the beginning of the creation there was a great explosion of light. When God created the world, the first thing he says is Yehi Or. So there's already, in Kabbalistic sources, it started with a great explosion of light. So when they talk about whatever they refer to it as, they might, I don't want to, but the point is, they might not be wrong. They might have the years wrong, but they write on the concept. But I'll tell you what the Gemara says Yehi Or means. It wasn't the light of the sun. Hazak Baruch. It refers to a spiritual light that's called Or Ganuz. Or Ganuz. What is that? It seems there was a very spiritual light that existed. It was created on day one. However, God did not reveal it to the actual world itself until the first Friday. Friday afternoon, actually, it came out. This Or Ganuz is a spiritual light that's very, very, very strong, very powerful. It lasted 12 hours on Friday, 12 hours Friday night, and 12 hours Shabbat. It only lasted for 36 hours. After that, Motzei Shabbat, it disappeared and went back into the Genizah box. That's what it's called, Or Ganuz. God said, the world is not ready for this light. Motzei Shabbat, Adam realized that light left. So he replaced it with a physical light. It says, Motzei Shabbat, Adam took 2 stones and he rubbed them together. And all of a sudden, a fire came out. And that's why we make the beracha on Motzei Shabbat, Boreh Me'oreh Ha'esh. We're commemorating the invention, not of the light bulb by Tom Edison, but we're commemorating the invention of fire, of Adam HaRishon, on Motzei Shabbat. And what was he trying to invent? Because he lost the Or Ganuz. Okay, great. 36 hours Or Ganuz. But it didn't bother me so much that we lost the organuz, to be honest. You know why it didn't bother me? 'Cause I don't know what it is. So therefore, I mean, you got to know what it is, and then you say, oh, we lost it. But I don't know what the item is in the first place. Okay, so there's no more organuz. Fine. Starbucks open? Yes. Baruch Hashem. I need a coffee. I don't need organuz. That's what I was thinking. I mean, practically speaking, what's the organuz anyway? So I needed to try to figure out what is organuz, and then I could appreciate what we lost. So I found a comment. I found a comment from a rabbi called Sfat Emet. And Sfat Emet says a big hiddush. He says, listen, there's two types of light. One he refers to as Or HaSoref, and one as he refers to as Or HaMe'ir. I explain. What is Or HaSoref? That's the light that comes through what we call combustion. If you take, for example, oil, before the light can come, or simultaneously as the light is coming and lighting, the oil is deteriorating. The oil has to turn into a gas, has to evaporate in order, you have to burn the oil in order for the fire to come out. That's called Ola Soref, which, by the way, teaches us the principle of B'riyato Shel Olam. First, in order to have a light, you have to have a deterioration of something. When you light a wax candle, you need to melt the wax first, and after the wax, well, then you already have a fire. First has to have darkness before you have light. That's the regular way things work. It's called Or HaSoref. But there's another Or that you never saw before. It's called Or HaMe'ir. That's a light that you light, but there's no deterioration. It doesn't need to go through the process of Hoshech to bring Or. It goes directly to Or straight, and it bypasses the negative. It bypasses it. It's Or HaMe'ir. And that's Or HaGanuz. When Or HaGanuz was around, the world did not follow the principle of the Gemara that I just quoted to you. That first you have to have the black goats and then you have to have the white goats. That's in this world. But in the world of Or HaGanuz, the white sheep come first. You don't need to go through a makkah in order to grow. You don't need to have a depression in order to come out of it. In the world of Or HaGanuz, it's Or HaMe'ir. There's light without any evaporation of the oil. It says when Mashiach comes, the Or HaGanuz will be coming back to us. And it says baked products will grow on trees. You're not going to need to go to work. You're not going to have to go through a process. Not that go stand on a line in the bakery. Even if you go to the tree, you're not going to have to cut wheat and then grind it, and then you're going to have to sift it, and then ladies have to make the challah, and they go through all the 11 processes of baking the dough. No. You go to the tree and take a challah, finish. It's going to be all ready. No more challah parties. Now we'll figure another party, I'm sure. But the point is, that's Or HaGanuz. It's Or HaMe'ir. So I said to myself, if somehow we can access Or HaGanuz, that would give us the secret in life, how to go straight to success without having to deal with the dips and the downs and the negatives that usually precede it. All right, so I went to start to look. Where am I going to find Ora Ganuz? Oh, that's an educated guess. How did you know? Well, let's go slow. I found it actually in the Rokayah. There was a great rabbi called the Rokayah, and he says that Ora Ganuz actually manifests itself 4 hours a year. And if you're lucky enough to catch those 4 hours, you're able to access the world where the white sheep go in front and you don't need the black goats to go first. What are those 4 hours a year? So he says that every night of Hanukkah, we're commemorating a miracle. What was the miracle in Hanukkah? They lit the menorah. They only had enough for one night. The Bet Yosef says when they came back the next day, they found that the oil was still filled to the top. That's called Or HaMe'ir. That's a light that comes without having the oil burn. That is Ora Ganuz. Where there's no Hoshech that needs to precede the Or. There was still just as much amount of oil. It did not dissipate. It did not disappear. That's Ora Ganuz, he said. And the Ora Ganuz, says the Rokayah, every year when we light a menorah, the first half hour, there's a manifestation of Ora Ganuz. Now I know our oil disappears, but it doesn't matter. We're commemorating Sha'asa Nisim La'avotenu Bayamim Hahem. We connect to Ora Ganuz. And since there's 8 nights, and a half hour a night is the minimum for the mitzvah, so it's 4 hours a year. So the books bring down, at that moment of the lighting of the menorah, the first half hour, if you know what I do, I start to pray to God and say, God, all the things that we're going through, I know it's a process. I know the process is the hit has to precede the gedal. But now I'm in front of Or Ganuz. And in front of Or Ganuz, it doesn't follow that system. And in the merit of the menorah and the lights, let it go straight, without the introduction of Hoshech. And I might add, that is exactly the Segula of ELAHA DeMEIR, ANENI. When we say ELAHA DeMEIR, we're connecting to the MEIR of Nerot Hanukkah, like the Maharsha said. And what are we saying? God, we could do this all year long, but specifically we do it on Hanukkah, but you could do it all year long. God Almighty, I'm going through a crisis. And therefore, let me connect to the MEIR of Nerot Hanukkah, because Nerot Hanukkah teaches us an Or Ganuz where you don't need to have darkness before light. Light precedes the darkness. That's the Segula. That's how it works. ELAHA DeMEIR. As the Maharsha says, and I quote now, because there's one more line that I think is relevant for today. He says, ELAHA DeMEIR לנו במלכות יוון הקודמת בנס הנרות של חנוכה כמו שייסד הפייט, like the song goes, ומי יאיר לך מאיר, הוא יעננו גם במלכות זה הרשעה להציל אותנו בנס מידיהם. The Rab says there's a piyut. Not familiar with him, but it's a piyut that talks about the Jewish people at the end of time that are going to go through terrible, perilous times by the hands of our enemies. It's probably, or certainly, what we're going through now. I think it's obvious that these are all moments at the end of time. I'm not a predictor. I'm not a forecaster. But the world cannot go past the year 6000. That's the expiration date. And we're in 5784. So maximum is 216 years if we make it to the finish line, which we're probably not. So all these moments over here are moments preparing us for the end. You will see it. But we want to see it without the suffering. And even though they tell us in the books, well, that's the process. Yeah, that's the process with Or HaSoref. But God can make this process with Or MEIR. And therefore, when we say ELAHA DeMEIR, we're praying for God now for the situation in Eretz Israel. Why does it have to happen with hostages? Why does it have to happen with damayik? Why does it have to happen with all displacement and all this trouble? We know there's rules, B'riyatosh shel olam. But there's also an organuz factor. And therefore, when we say ELAHA DeMEIR, not so we could find a pair of keys that's lost. That's trivial. ELAHA DeMEIR now takes on a greater significance. God Almighty, even during the year, before Hanukkah, I connect to the organuz of the MEIR of Nes Hanukkah, and like the Maharsha says, Hu ya'anenu gam b'malchut zeh harish'ah, that God should answer us not in Malchut Yavan, that's past history, in this Malchut. Mind you, the wicked Malchut. Lehatzil otanu benes midehem. The Nes Hanukkah is still in the world. So if somebody says, but that's the process, but that was not the process of Hanukkah. The oil did not burn. It went straight to the light. And we say to God, use that system. Albeit it might be an exceptional system, but it exists. And how do you pray for this? You say three words. ELAHA DeMEIR ANENI. God, who is the MEIR of Nerot Hanukkah. Yeah, but it's February. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. That's what Maharsha says. By the way, when Rabbi Meir told it to the warden in the prison, I don't think it was Hanukkah. It wasn't Hanukkah. I know it wasn't Hanukkah. He would have been home. He would have been lighting the menorah, Rabbi Meir. But my point is now that Hanukkah is coming, we could do something for our brethren in Eretz Israel during the first half hour. I know people get busy during the first half hour. Now, I promise you there is no organuz in a jelly donut. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff. But that's what happens. People like the menorah, okay, that's it. And we go inside, have a jelly donut, and spin some dreidels, and whatever you do. Eat some chocolates, and go out for dinner. No, you're squandering an opportunity. 4 hours a year. By the menorah, you have to sit. And you have to pray, but now we know what to pray. ELAHA DeMEIR ANENI. God, this is a process of organuz. This is we're sitting in front of it. If organuz works in February, all the more so it works in front of the menorah. And we need it now for the process to become a pleasant process. It doesn't have to be a hasba shalom, a rigorous or a torturous or a painful process, although it is. But it doesn't have to be. And there's a way to pray for the process to be not from Or HaSoref, but from Or HaGanuz. That is the Segula of ELAHA DeMEIR. Now the class should end here. But I do have it might be out of line, but I do have a grievance to file. And I don't usually publicly file grievances. But it's something that should be brought to your attention. Since the lighting of the menorah has such a value, it's Or HaGanuz. You must know that when it comes to the performance of mitzvot, part of the mitzvah, and maybe the key of the mitzvah, is the preparation for it. Although in the modern world, nobody wants to be bothered with the preparation. Today it's a phone call, build my sukkah and make sure you take it down also. And I'm going to do God a favor, and I'll sit in it for 2.5 minutes to eat the bread, but I don't want to have anything to do with any, getting my hands dirty with it. We like to farm the hard work and the labor to somebody else. I don't think that's a proper behavior. I don't think it's respectful that we have such an attitude that we want to do the mitzvot in the best way, but we don't have anything involved in the process. The best matzot, I want the matzot baked on Erev Pesach, after Chatzot, and deliver it to this place over there, at this time over there, and now. But why don't you come and help us? No. I'm willing to pay. Now there's something to say about the preparation of mitzvot. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't, go and buy food that's ready-made for Shabbat, but not to make anything lichbot Shabbat. There was a Gemara that said there was a Kohen that came into the Beit HaMikdash with white satin gloves on. And they threw him out. Gemara Pesachim. Because he didn't want to get his hands dirty. They said, what are you talking about? That's the mitzvah. And I might point out to you, in the Beit HaMikdash, the job of the Kohen was not to light the menorah. Anybody could light the menorah. That's what Rambam says. You know what the job of the Kohen was? To set it up and clean it. That's the main item. I mean, today, unfortunately, they've made these ready-made, it's ready-made, made in China. So a guy in China made us the menorah, put the wick in. That's it. All you got to do. Now, by the way, if we could figure out how we could light it for us also, even better. Meaning, if we can get pre-lit menorah. That's great. Pre-lit, then we got to do nothing. Straight to the jelly donuts. They have them. I'm sure they have it. Pre-lit menorah, that's it. It comes lit already. Again, I'm not saying that you can't use those, but my point is, in the Arizal, the Rashash, he had kavanot when you pour the oil in the jug. There's kavanot. There's prayers that we make when you put the wick in. Everything that you do over there is significant. And my point is, if we really want to get the benefit from Ora Ganuz, we might reconsider the way not only we light the menorah, but the preparations for this mitzvah. Like when we were young, we used to get the regular menorah from school, put the candles in ourselves, set it up, pour the oil, make the wick. There was a certain involvement. And especially that we know that the menorah comes from such a high place. That's my grievance, and pardon me if I'm out of line. It'll work regardless. Take my word, even if you get the ready-made, I'm not saying the Organuz miracle is not going to work. It'll work. But I'm just saying in general, the attitude of mitzvah bo yoter mebishlucho. The mitzvah is much better when you do it yourself than when you designate a shaliyah. But to the members that assembled tonight, you've learned tonight a Segula that is baduk nuseh, that is tried and tested. The 3 words of ELAHA DeMEIR. ELAHA DeMEIR means not the God of Rabbi Meir, the God that made the lights of menorah light up without the oil burning. You went against Briyato Shel Olam, that the black goat doesn't need to come before the white sheep. You don't need to have Vahi Erev before Vahi Boker. You don't need the Makkah before Gedal. Meir reminds us it can happen a more pleasant and easier way. So it is our prayer, first and foremost, with Eretz Yisrael. ELAHA DeMEIR ANENI. The same miracle you made on Hanukkah with the Shemen. Let the process be or. Let it be light without a darkness, not preceding and not following. And then in our personal lives. And everybody has to think of their own situations. And we pray to God as well. Today, tomorrow, all year, but specifically during the 4 hours of Hanukkah. ELAHA DeMEIR ANENI. Shavua Tov u'mevorach.